Fire. A new guest has never been on the podcast before. She's somewhat famous, so you may already know her. Meghan Payton. Yes, the daughter of NFL coach Sean Payton. Meghan is now, I guess she's on a global takeover of sports media. She has her own podcast. She puts out videos. She does a lot of gambling. Meghan, how you doing?
J-Mac, that was quite the intro. And, I will absolutely take that. I feel honored to be coming on Straight Fire, fan of the podcast, fan of yours, and fan of anyone that enjoys a little sports gamble. And it's fun to talk betting.
Yeah, it's interesting because there isn't a ton of information on you on the web. It's weird because you're like one of these, like, what, a Gen Z, X, Y, I don't know the freaking letters,
Right.
but you're one of these young people, and there just isn't a ton of info. So, like, I don't really know a ton about you. I like learning stuff about people. Obviously, your dad's famous, but I'm curious, like your background. Did you grow up like playing sports? I know that one of the big things when I'm like reading about these potential quarterbacks who are going to be drafted, it's like, yeah, his dad was a businessman, his mom was a nurse. And then there's other guys like Joe Burrow, whose dad was a coach and his grandfather was a coach. So, like, at the dinner table, Joe Burrow's talking sports and football and plays all the time. Obviously, your dad being a coach, you have an interest in sports. I'm just your background. Tell me about growing up as a sports girl. I'm assuming you played.
You, J-Mac, I'll tell you this: my scouting report's very limited. It wouldn't have much to it, and that's why we're talking sports and we're not playing sports. I'll tell you that right now. I was not the athletic kid growing up, but yes, being around sports, obviously football, my entire life. I definitely have always loved the sport. You know what? I'll put some respect on cheerleading because I was in cheer, and that to
Oh,
me, if you've watched any of the documentaries, it's a sport, whether you'd like to think so or not. So we did cheer back in the day, but no, I think I obviously growing up around it. I grew up in Texas for a lot of life too, so Friday Night Lights was big.
oh.
Loved all of the football scenes, and then of course, as betting got onto the map a little bit later in life, I thought, okay, this is a fun avenue to not only talk about sports but try to make some money off of it.
Yeah, no, cheerleading's definitely a sport. Bring It On, a
Thank
great
you.
movie back in the day. I don't know about Bring It On 2 or whatever. But
Bring
also
it
my
on.
I know some people who were watching like this Dallas Cowboys cheerleader reality show.
Yeah,
Have
and
you heard
it's
of this?
okay. So not only have I heard of this they had their own show on CMT back in the day. It was like making the team for
Right,
Dallas
right.
Cowboys, and then they came out with their Netflix special. But fun fact, whenever my dad was coaching at the Cowboys as like the offense coordinator, there was a thing you could do as a kid, and you'd get to do one game. You'd sign up for it or try out for it and go do a halftime performance with the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders. And it was pretty intense, even as like an 8-year-old trying to like make the team for the guest performance. And it was cool. So eventually you got the whole, spiel. We got to go out halftime with the cool outfit and all the kids were out
Yeah.
there. So that's my connection to the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders.
Wow. So, okay, that sounds like an interesting upbringing, having access to going on the field at Cowboys games. So when you went to college, was your focus like, you know what, I still want to kind of be in sports, or were you just like, I've had enough. Dad's talking about it all the time. Let me move on from sports. Like, what was the college game plan?
I was kind of anti-sports for a little bit. I think in high school, I thought like, all right, you want to make your own identity, kind of step away from it. But I felt myself like still like, secretly turning on all the games on Sunday. And I'm like,
Mhm.
I like this, even if my friends aren't into it's always been in me. And so moved out to California for college, started studying a little bit more on sports journalism, got connected
Mm.
to some great people early on in the industry, Laura Oakman, Aaron Andrews, Krista Thompson, a lot of really, really established people in this industry that were and have been great mentors to me and helped show a cool, unique side of it. And I was like, I can see this working out. This could be fun.
That's awesome. Yeah, I know Carissa Thompson better than the other two, and
Yeah.
she's tremendous. I did a gambling show with her and Cowherd
Oh,
digitally at Fox. She knows her stuff, but it is tough. Like when you get out of school right now, all you read is articles. Oh no, nobody can get jobs. The economy, it's brutal. It's blah blah blah. But like there was an avenue when you came out where sports gambling is starting to pop. We've been joking about it, calling it the gambling gold rush. And I'm assuming, like, listen, you get in where you fit in. I started in newspapers, and I pretty quickly saw within a few years, like, this stuff is dying. I got to get the hell out quickly. So I
Yep.
went to magazines and then the internet. I'm assuming that was something that impacted you as well coming out of school.
Absolutely. I mean, and you've been in the gambling space for a long time, and to see it from where it was maybe 7, 8, 9 years ago to where it is now, it's grown immensely. I remember coming out of college, and I think a lot of people could relate to this, where everyone's telling you, you got to go local news, you got to move to
Oh
like some
gosh.
small Ohio town. And
Yeah.
I was like, I'm living out in LA. I go to school out here. Like, that sounds terrible. And there's a lot of digital outlets as well that were kind of coming into the scene. And yeah, I got into some of the sports betting stuff early on at some different companies, and really, really fell in love with it.
Oh, you mean you didn't want to move to like Podunk, Iowa for like the first few years of your career?
I remember my dad being like, "If you care about your career, you're gonna have to move to Iowa." And I'm like, let's hold on. Maybe not all of us have to go jump around 20 states until we make it.
Yeah, I had offers for newspaper jobs, and I'm pretty sure it's Bay City, Michigan. I mean, I went there and I was like, there's no way
Yeah.
I could live here.
So
It
you
was
get
like a tiny town in Kentucky, and I was like, oh well, it is only an hour from the University of Kentucky in Louisville. Maybe I could make it work. And then I was like, no, I can't
no
make that. So yeah, like I can understand I want to do that, but your dad having been a coach, you got to work your way up. Did
100%.
I mean? So did you have to move with him wherever he went?
Interesting enough, a lot of the moves happened, luckily for me, even like when I was really, really young. So moved around a lot as a kid, East Coast with Philly, whenever he was with the Eagles. We went to Giants in New York, then Dallas, then New Orleans. And then I think because it was, a lot of moving, I remember my parents being like, all right, we're gonna make sure you guys are settled for high school so you're not
Mm.
moving around. So we actually moved to Texas, which was super
That's
close to
fun.
New Orleans. So we got to go back and forth a bunch, but I actually stayed there for all of high school, which was cool because you felt like you didn't have that fear of like, if he doesn't stay here, are we moving?
I think I remember that because yeah, your dad was with the Saints, and all the rumors were, well, the family's still in Texas. He's gonna coach the Cowboys. That's
Yeah.
obvious. And like those rumors, I definitely remember that. That was like a thing, and you had to deal with all that nonsense, huh? As a kid, I'm sure you can't tune it out, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. And then I remember a big one was when I moved out to LA for school. I think that was like when one of the Chargers job was
Oh, that's
opening, and it was
right.
like,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and I don't know. I would always read about it, and of course, everything, as we all know, being in media can sometimes be exaggerated from nothing,
Just a
and
little bit. Yeah.
just a little bit, just a little bit. Don't let the truth get in the way of a good story. And yet it gave me a unique perspective, I think, to media. And at first was a little bit of the reason why I was hesitant to get involved in it, because I never wanted to be a like inauthentic reporter, this or that. And I think that's also why the betting stuff was cool, because it was like, hey, here's a different outlook that's not necessarily, about writing these crazy breaking news stories, or writing these stories that are maybe like kind of, hurting out other people. It's just, hey, here's a different way to talk about the sport that we all love.
Mm. And I guess your big edge is you obviously know football. Your dad, I'm sure he's talked about football with you for years. And so you have kind of a built in thing. Did you instantly, were you like, you know what, I'm just going to make football my gambling thing? As opposed to, there's a bunch of people who say, hey, you can find a big edge in betting the WNBA or Major League Baseball or whatever the sport is. Were you instantly like, let me just go football first?
I think instantly I thought, okay, yeah, football first, because this is like the bread and butter sport. But
Mm-hmm.
I mean, as you know, as a sports better, like everything's on the table. And what's cool about what we're doing at Fanduel is, and as you know, we're covering all sports. So maybe like, yesterday I was all over the Caitlin Clark, like her assists number, and let's take the
Mm.
fever to cover. So we'll touch on all of the sports, but I definitely get that like Christmas morning feeling with the football season starting still.
Yeah, it's and football's the toughest market to crack, right? It's so
100%.
difficult, and a lot of people are like, "Oh, come on, you missed your last two bets." I'm like, dude, do you guys
It's
realize
hard.
57% is like a huge victory for the
If you're
season?
doing, if you're
57%.
It's a
Like,
huge victory. If you're over
yeah.
50%, okay, J Mike, I have a question for you, because I find it sometimes I have a little bit of like bias and attachment to my teams that I like in football. So it actually makes it sometimes harder to bet versus maybe WNBA or MLB. I might not have as much of a connection or a team that I'm passionate about. So you can really just like look at the numbers, look at the trends and the stats. And sometimes I'm like, wait, why are these bets? Why am I getting more success with these versus my own sport? And it's like you got to find a way to not attach yourself to the teams and the players that you love, which I find myself doing in football.
So you do that? You think you do that more in football as
Yeah,
opposed to okay?
because
Huh?
you get attached. Like, don't you feel like I'm like, no, like I'm dead set on this guy. Like he's gonna be a star, and I gotta be proven wrong. I have to have a few bad beats before I'm like, no, I'm done. I'm done taking, the Seahawks to cover. I'm
Well,
done.
yeah, I think you're probably right. Last year, the Saints, I really liked them. The schedule was cake, and they just kept doing the dumbest things. And the coach was uh, awful. He's probably going to be the first coach fired. Oh, by the way, that leads me to ask you. So obviously you have opinions and takes, and you're giving out bets and all this stuff. Have you gotten any where you've been maybe harsh on a particular player or coach, and it roundabout way got back to your dad, and then you heard from him on it? Because listen, I've taken some shots at people, and for instance, Cam Newton then comes after me, and people come in like other athletes at Fox are like, "Hey Jay, you're really going hard at Cam, huh?" Yeah, he's not a fan. That kind
Yeah,
of like
he's
people will send a message to me through other channels. But have you had any of that yet or not really?
hasn't happened yet where it's actually gotten through, him to me. I mean, I'm sure as you know, like he's not too shy himself on his takes and his stuff.
Yes.
So he doesn't have much room to talk if he wants to come after me, but I'm kidding. But I think there's a balance in our industry, and it's something you do really well. It's something Colin does really well. You're passionate about your opinions. You do it in a respectful way, and at the end of the day, like happy to be wrong. One of the like favorite things that you guys do on the herd is like you acknowledge where you're right, where you're wrong, and that holds yourself accountable. So
Mm.
I might come out with a hot take that like I'm fading all stock on the Falcons this year, and saying no, everyone's hyping up Atlanta, and I'm not buying in. And that's in lack of a other way, I'm kind of like hating on Kirk Cousins, and I'm hating on some of these younger athletes. But I will gladly admit if they start the season 5-0, I was wrong.
Wait, so that is one of your takes. You're out on the Falcons. Let me look
I'm
up their week one line. Falcons at home against Pittsburgh, according to Fanduel. Atlanta's -3. So you're like in Pittsburgh, I'm gathering.
you know, Pittsburgh is going to be an interesting again. Is it in Pittsburgh or is it in
No, it's
Atlanta?
in Atlanta.
It's in
I don't know
Atlanta.
that there's a home field advantage for the Falcons there.
Maybe not, but I think there's still a home field advantage for Mike Tomlin in Pittsburgh, even with the quarterback drama that they're dealing with. I think the Falcons could potentially win that game. I don't know if their defense is improved much at
Mm.
all, and that's what concerns me. I'm just ultimately not buying in on the fact that they're going to go from a 7-win team to a 10-win team just because Kirk Cousins comes into the party. I think we're not giving enough credit for Baker Mayfield and what he did last season. And you can still get the Bucks, I think, at like plus 300 to win the NFC South.
The
So for a
Bucks.
wide, which is I
Ooh.
don't know, like why are we buying the Bucks? Like
Say more. I have not looked into Tampa winning the division at all. Let me see who they even play in week one. Tampa Bay is at home against Washington, and Jaden Daniels favored by 3.5.
I would take the Bucks there.
Hmm.
I mean,
Okay. I didn't listen. Hey, I like it. You're hot on the Bucks.
yeah,
The Baker Mayfield, you think he could duplicate what happened last year?
I think so. I think that like for Baker, what's hard is, he hasn't had inconsistency. He switched from different coaches, different teams, and finally he has an organization that says, "We're buying in on you.
Mhm.
We're gonna pay you. We're gonna make sure we re-sign the pieces around you, keep who we can, and build this team." And ultimately, the Bucks didn't lose a ton of pieces. They get Mike Evans signed. Chris Godwin's still there. And at the end of the day, they're still playing in a very relatively easy division, can we say, in the South, where what's unfortunate for the Bucks is that they do have to play in that number one schedule because they won the division. So they'll have a
Yeah.
couple tougher matchups than the others in the division. But look, if Baker Mayfield can stay the way he did last year. I know Canales won't be there anymore. I think that the Bucks could be a little bit of an upset team.
So I'm looking at Pro Football Focus, and they're going to start a rookie center, the kid out of Duke, their first round pick, a rookie receiver out of Arizona. The interior offensive line does not look great. And I, I don't know if Washington will be able to take advantage, but you make a good point. Like, this is a team that got to the playoffs last year, won a game. Winfield is still a stud in the secondary. Vita Vea is still very good. Maybe there's a case that they're good. I did. The problem with this team is they're just so boring. You
Yeah,
know,
I
there's
know.
no real identity when you watch them. It's like, I mean, last year just running into the line of scrimmage, and it's just a lot of boring games. So yeah, maybe I'm missing something. Okay, that's a good take. You're all in on Tampa. So what else week one? Anything else jump out at you? Um, Cowboys are 2.5 point dogs in Cleveland. My Jets and the line, I don't know if you noticed this, the line has cratered to Jets plus 3.5. It was 6.5, 7 like 2 weeks ago. I don't know if this has to do with Trent Williams unsigned, Brandon Ayuk uncertainty, but anything on those are two of the marquee games, I think. Cowboys Browns, which will be called by Tom Brady, and then Jets Niners.
I'm so excited to hear Tom Brady in the booth.
Yeah.
He's going to be so good for Cowboys. Um, obviously they get CeeDee Lamb signed today. It had to be a whole waiting process, but ultimately that gives them the security. I'm interested to see though, if you remember back to when Ezekiel Elliott had the whole contract negotiation thing. I was actually talking to Jane Slater about this today, Cowboys beat reporter. And if you remember, he was in a bit of a pitch count in week one after his signing because it was shorter than the CeeDee Lamb. I think he only had 4 or 5 days before week one. And so they had to ease him into it. You don't want those soft tissue injuries.
Yeah.
I'm interested to see with CeeDee Lamb in week one, how quick they're going to be to, get him out there, how the target share is going to be split up. I actually could see the Browns winning this game. I like Dallas this season, and I've got the Cowboys winning the NFC East. But CeeDee Lamb's such a big part of that offense. It might take like 1, maybe 2 games for him to get clicking. So I'd buy in on the Browns in that game for sure.
Wow, Meghan with some major takes here. The Bucks and the Cowboys winning. I don't have
Are
either
you
of those
Eagles?
two.
Are you on the Eagles in the East?
I think the Eagles are going to be very good. The other line that's interesting is the Arizona Cardinals cross country travel to Buffalo. This was 7, then 6.5. Now I'm seeing 5.5 at your shop, FanDuel. It's kind of juiced 5.5 for Buffalo, but I don't know anything on Arizona. Kyler Murray going on the road. Josh Allen, no Stephon Diggs. The Buffalo defense just ain't what it used to be personnel wise. Milano's out. Anything on that one?
I have a few teams this season, J-Mac, where I feel like I wouldn't be surprised if they win 5 games, and I wouldn't be surprised if they win 10 games. The Arizona Cardinals are one of those teams where I'm like, you could either get Kyler back, he's healthy, and him and Marvin Harrison Jr. connect out of the gate, and Jonathan Gannon turns the whole organization around. That could happen. But also, we could be putting a lot on a rookie receiver and a slightly unproven quarterback, and they could be a 6-win team. That wouldn't blow me away. And then Buffalo, everyone keeps talking about the Bills in this rebuild year. And I get it. To some degree, they are. But to some degree, they still have Josh Allen, under center. I like the way that the offense did look towards the end of last season. I mean, Joe Brady comes in and everyone's talking about Stephon Diggs leaving. But remember, the target share towards the end of the year, it was Khalil Shakir getting majority of the targets with Dalton Kincaid. I still like the Bills. I would bet on the Bills in this game as well. Maybe Kyler, Marvin Harrison get something going later in the year, but I wouldn't imagine in Buffalo they stand much of a chance.
For full season stuff, and it's really tough to bet full season overs because of injuries. I don't mess around with too much of it. But I am curious how you think this kind of shakes out when you start to look at playoff teams. And I don't know. Do you do any full season wagers or shy away from them?
No, I love them, J-Mac. It's so bad.
Oh.
I love all of them. And you know how it's like you kind of like start to write this script and it's like, no, but if one thing goes wrong, then everything crumbles. But I love the full season stuff. I mean, I definitely have my division picks. speaking of Cowboys, I really like CD to lead in receiving yards for the year. It's at
Oof.
plus 750. It's the second shortest on the odds book. And when I look at that, it's obviously you're taking the top receiver, so it's not too much of a hot take. It's just, well, how are the shares being split up? And
Mhm.
last season, I mean, Dak's throwing to CD. There's not a good clear cut wide receiver two. Jake Ferguson, I think, had the second most targets or
Yeah.
receptions, and it was like quite a gap between him and CD Lamb. Then I worry with, okay, Tony Pollard no longer there. What's this run game going to look like? Are they going to just have to throw it at all points? So I'm very happy the CD Lamb contract got done. I don't think it'll take him too long to get right back into that offense. So that's one of my favorite futures bets. I've got a couple others that I like as
Go
well.
fire away. Go ahead.
Fire away. All right. So I like that one. I'm taking, we're talking about the Bills. I like the Dolphins to win the East, to AFC East.
What?
I
Oh
know,
my,
I
you
know.
what? This is why she's
My hot
taking
takes,
over
J
the
Mac.
sports gambling space. I mean, Tampa, Dallas, and now Miami, division winners. If those three happened, I mean, you'll just retire over to some island in the Caribbean, right? I mean,
You know what's really
oof.
tempting, and we actually did this as a fun segment. I'm not encouraging anyone to do it, but if you go through on FanDuel and you can parlay all the division, like, if you pick the correct division winner
Oh
in every
Jesus.
division, and then mine was at like, plus 100,000 or something
Oh
crazy.
yeah. No,
Yeah,
I mean,
but
if you pulled that off, that would be oof.
yeah, then we would definitely retire and we'd be just the ambassador for everything NFL gambling. I obviously have some chalkier plays, some, favorites. I like the Niners and whatnot. But speaking of, when we look at the Dolphins, everyone's going to talk about how they are later in the season. I think they have a pretty favorable schedule. They don't have to play Buffalo super late in the year, which is going to help with the weather. Tua now is getting paid. It feels like the Dolphins are finding their rhythm, their kind of groove on offense. And then speaking of Dolphins, if you're not into them winning the division, my favorite like long shot is Devon Achane to lead in rushing yards for the
Hmm.
year. I mean, it sounds crazy, and you have to scroll. Like it's not a top bet. It's at a really good number, but when he was healthy, he was getting more carries than Mostert was. We know how much Mike McDaniel is moving the ball down the field. It's such a fast-paced offense. And I think a lot of people might be hesitant to bet on that because of how dominant their passing game is. But I mean, it's if you have a good passing game, it opens the run game and vice versa. I think he's going to be a sneaky good player in terms of fantasy and in terms of betting as well.
Yeah. All right. Well, we could wrap up with just I know that, obviously the gambling space is full of landmines. When you're hot, everybody loves you. As soon as
Yeah.
you miss a few, you're an idiot. You don't know anything, blah, blah, blah. How do you handle the online trolls? And I'm sure, listen, as a guy, I don't really care. I'm really not unbothered by a lot of these clowns online. I am curious, how do you handle it? I know it's easy to say, "Oh, I'm not bothered," but I don't know. You're way younger than I am. You're still on the come up in your career. Um, I don't know. How are you handling it?
I I think that is one of the positives of growing up around like a lot of negative media, even from a kid. So I think I saw it a lot. I mean, just with, people would write stories about my dad, I'd read it. And I think that's something I learned from an early age of just like, there's only a few people you should really care about the opinion of, and that opinion matters. And at the end of the day, like there's gonna always be trolls on the internet, and you really can't let that affect you. I think the biggest thing that would affect me was always like whenever it was like, oh, early on in your career and you mess up something and someone calls you out on, like that wasn't correct. It's like, all right, that gives you the motivation to make sure you're,
Hmm.
working harder. But the other stuff, it has to be background noise or else you'll go crazy. You cannot let it affect you.
Yeah, no, it's certainly a thing, and I think you said it well. Like you're used to that growing up, and I don't know that everybody handles it well, though, Megan. I mean, obviously you're a seasoned veteran now, having your dad grew up as a coach, but there's a lot of people I've worked closely with people who, when they kind of step in it and the online mob comes after them, it just doesn't go well for them, you know?
No, it's hard. It's definitely hard. And I'd be lying if I said it never affected me. But I think you have to be, obviously confident in your own stuff, and also just know, this is how I like to say it too, is it's like, you look at Yelp reviews, and Yelp reviews only tell you a certain amount of things, because no one's going to a nice dinner and then saying, let me go write a nice Yelp review. It's when they go to a bad
It
dinner,
sucks.
that's
Yeah.
when they're
Ooh,
writing it. So you're
very
not getting
well
the
said.
positive feedback, because
Yeah.
people are way more inclined to, come after you
Yeah.
whenever
The
it's something they don't
negativity
like.
for
Yeah,
sure. All
exactly.
right. Great stuff, Meghan. Payton, Fanduel ambassador. Good luck on all your bets this season, except for the ones going against me. And we'll see you soon, Meghan.
Thank you, J Mac. I appreciate it.
That was great. Sorry to
Awesome.
keep you a little long.